Back to our continued coverage of the Sean Combs criminal case in New York. I'm Jesse Weber. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get to more of your questions. We're going to get Elizabeth Milner up right now. Before I do, I just want to let you know, we got a super chat question that came in from Smarty Pants. Smarty Pants, first of all, thank you so much. I know you've been very active in our questions for the last several weeks. We really do appreciate it. The question is, jury does not or does have to be unanimous on the RICO predicates for the RICO conspiracy case. Yes. For that charge, RICO conspiracy, yes, they absolutely have to be, but only with respect to two. Only with respect to at least two predicate crimes. And I believe on the verdict form, they even have to check off which of those were actually proven. So it's a really good question. By the way, Miss N. Kesey, Jesse, fellow class of 2012 lawyer, is that Kenza? Kenza, if it is, put it down in the chat. Good to see you, Kenza. It's been a minute. Where have you been? I hope it's Kenza. Anyway, thank you so much. All right, let me bring on Elizabeth Milner, Law and Crimes in-court reporter, a fan favorite. Everybody loves Elizabeth. Why? Let me read it to you. Alana Rodriguez says, "Hi, Queen Elizabeth and Jesse. You're both great. Jesse's handsome."
Let's just say, I guess she been around this shit since day one.
Elizabeth's gorgeous. Question for Elizabeth. Did Combs' family come today? Elizabeth, good to see you. Did Combs' family come today?
Well, that's a great question. And also, thank you so much for the sweet, kind words. I always appreciate it. And I read a lot of y'all's comments. So thank you. Again, thank you. But yes, it was a full house today inside that courtroom, literally body to body, a lot of people inside that courtroom. And especially over on the defense's side, where you're seeing more of Diddy's support system and family come to court today to really kind of be here for the final days of the trial, pretty much. Of course, that being summations, aka closing arguments. So we saw everyone from Janice Combs, Diddy's mother, Charlucci, who's one of Diddy's very close friends, who's been inside that courtroom every single day of trial and even was attending some of those pre-trial hearings too. We saw Keisha Combs, that's Sean Combs' sister, Justin Combs, Sean Combs' son. Quincy was there. Again, that's also Sean Combs' son. Lisa Hilton, who is the mother of Justin Combs, was there. Sarah Chapman, who is Diddy's daughter, Chance's mother. And then, of course, the twins were there, that being Delilah Combs and Jesse Combs. And so it's interesting, the only one that notably was absent from what I could see inside the main courtroom was just Christian Combs. But everybody else, and I should also say probably his youngest daughter, that being Love, she wasn't there inside the courtroom. But I think notably also some interesting faces that are inside that courtroom today, too, maybe not necessarily on Sean Combs' side, was Doug Wigder, who we all know to be Cassandra Ventura Fine's attorney, as well as Jay Clayton, and that's the acting U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. So a lot of famous faces are inside that courtroom, a lot of people that we're very familiar with as we've been following this case pretty closely. Oh, and I think I forgot Karen Agnifalo's inside that courtroom too. So it's a lot of people there really trying to see what these summations are going to be, both on the prosecution side and then once we get to the defense's closing tomorrow, obviously for the defense's side too.
Since there are no cameras in that federal courtroom, there's no audio equipment in that courtroom, Elizabeth has been our eyes and our ears for the last several weeks. So we have this question from Merlene Spies. What is Diddy's reaction today? Does he look worried?
Yeah, so I was trying to get some peeks in between all the heads of the attorneys that were literally right in front of me inside the courtroom today. Because normally that row right in front of us in terms of the press is normally empty. But today, again, everybody's inside that courtroom. So when I was getting peeks and glimpses over at the defense's table, I was trying to see what Sean Combs' demeanor was during these closing arguments, especially as they were talking about RICO, especially as they were talking about sex trafficking, both alleged victim 1, that being Cassie, and alleged victim 2, that being Jane. And so from what I could see, especially at the start of the trial, or excuse me, at the start of closing arguments today, I really kind of saw Sean Combs really just kind of stare a little bit into the distance from what I could see. He was kind of looking towards where the judge is on the bench, and obviously there's no witness over there. So really the prosecutor, that being Christy Slavic, was giving her summations over kind of towards the side right in front of the jury box with a microphone and a stand kind of like the one that I have my notes on right now. And so I saw him kind of looking a little past her, again, kind of towards the judge's direction. Then I would look over, I'd see him kind of like getting glimpses over at Christy Slavic doing the summations and possibly at the jury too. And then I saw him, doing what he usually does too while he's at the defense table, which is jotting notes down, passing them off to Mark Agnifalo. So really we got all these different kinds of movements from him. But in terms of just demeanor, I think he was just especially happy to have his family inside that courtroom, making sure everybody who was on the list was able to get inside in order to support him. And so from that was probably probably the most reaction I've seen of him is just a big smile on his face whenever he saw his family.
Elizabeth, we're reading the transcript of the closing arguments.
Cutting almost $1 trillion from Medicaid could kick millions of people off their health insurance.
That would be devastating. It's just wrong.
Ask your senators to protect access to rural health care.
We have no idea what the tone is like. We have no idea how Christy Slavic is actually delivering it. So we have a couple of questions here. Jack asks, Elizabeth, how would you describe the overall tone of Christy Slavic's closing argument? Was it emotional, methodical, aggressive? John Doe III asks, what seemed to be the prosecution's most powerful moment in closing argument so far?
Yeah, well, it seems like it's very methodical. And, you know, I know that this is a very high-profile trial. Obviously, it's a very high-profile defendant, that being Sean Combs. And so maybe people might think that they're expecting these very animated moments during the summations done by the government. But it seems like it's just really kind of very monotone, very concise, I should say. But I will say this, Jesse, is that Christy Slavic, when she's giving these closing arguments, she really is just laying it out as simple as possible, to the point I'm actually understanding everything that's going on. And I'm like, okay, this is really just kind of laid out perfectly for the jury. Now, could points have been kind of condensed a little bit and not as repetitive? Possibly, maybe. But in terms of just the tone in her demeanor while giving these closing argument, it is very kind of similar to how the government's opening statement was. It was just very monotone. You can tell she's kind of reading off.
Bro, chill out, bro. Look at Diddy.
But in terms of just the tone in her demeanor.
That boy locked the fuck in. He say, I'm fighting for my life. Hold on. He said, I'm fighting for my life. That's not funny, but man.
While giving these closing argument, it is very kind of similar to how the government's opening statement was. It was just very monotone. You can tell she's kind of reading off of the script that she had prepared. But I think it's interesting, too, because they put, you know, a PowerPoint presentation of just everything in terms of just all the assistants that the jury was able to see, all the escorts/entertainers that the jury was able to see. They were kind of bringing points from the transcript and relating it to certain points of maybe, you know, in some cases, the RICO conspiracy and arson and kidnapping, relating it to the testimony that was given by particular witnesses, including, you know, Kid Cudi or Capricorn Clark, those types of folks, and then bringing it back to the text messages where they're highlighting how these certain text messages will really kind of point to instances of alleged sex trafficking in terms of Jane or in terms of Cassie. And so that's really kind of the tone in terms of the closing arguments that they have. And from what I could see even of the jury, especially at the beginning, they were really kind of paying close attention. I think maybe towards the lunchtime hour, they were ready for lunch because it's a long time to be listening to just one person. But, you know, if I can binge watch a Netflix series for 8 hours, I think the jurors are okay with a 4-hour summation.
Well, that is why the defense wanted Mark Agnifilo to go on Friday. They didn't want him to have to go after the jury's exhausted from prosecution's closing argument and having lunch. Oh, now we got to hear the defense. It affects the impact of that. So I completely understand it. Elizabeth, I know you have to get back into court. Great seeing you. Thank you so much. Great reporting. We even have Outcast 93 saying, Elizabeth, you've been doing a fantastic job since the beginning of this trial. You really have. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to continue the conversation now with Candace Kelly, David Ring, Aaliyah Roberts. Maybe we'll get Sierra Gillespie back up here as well. Aaliyah, I want to turn to you. We have a question that came in from, by the way, if you have questions for our panel for the next hour, by the way, we're doing full coverage. We're going to have Anjanette doing, I think, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern as well. Elizabeth and I are going to be doing a recap for Sidebar, recap of the entire prosecution's closing argument today. You can check that up later on Law and Crime's YouTube page. But we're getting, so if you have questions for the next hour or so, make sure to submit them. We'll answer them here. Olivera Nikolic asks, do you think that Jane's testimony was a total fiasco, considering that she testified that she willingly agreed to everything? Shouldn't the prosecutors see that during preparation?
I do not think that Jane Doe's testimony was a waste of time. Let's say in this scenario where they don't believe that Jane Doe was coerced, right? What we did get from Jane Doe's testimony was a complete corroboration of everything that Cassie Ventura Fine testified to. Okay. We had a very, very good, a lot of the different ways in which she was manipulated and abused, and that the physicality between Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura Fine's relationship, which then makes her more credible, right? So let's say we completely have Jane Doe, I don't believe that she was forced, I don't believe that she was coerced. You still have then bolstered Cassie Ventura Fine's testimony, and that will, again, still lead to a conviction based off of everything that she had testified to.
You also need another victim. I mean, if you're talking about a pattern of abusive victims, I mean, sure, Mia, question, Brianna McGowan, but she makes up another specific counts in this indictment for racketeering, for sex trafficking, for transportation, engagement, prostitution, and there was a whole question about was there supposed to be another alleged victim that testified? Still kind of up in the air about what happened there. All right, David, back to you. We have a question from Matthew Robillard. How can Diddy even begin to handle over 70 civil lawsuits? I don't know if that's the exact number, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. Is it realistically possible to address each one, or is the strategy just to settle as many as possible?
Oh, but look, he's going to be fighting these civil cases for a long time. Let's assume he's acquitted, right? And he still has to deal with the civil lawsuits. And what's likely going to happen is somehow they're going to, get coordinated, and there's going to be, a process to them. But it's going to take years for him to get through the civil cases, and it will be even more difficult if he's in prison trying to do it. So no, he's not just going to go and start paying off everyone and settle those cases. He's going to hire, and I'm sure he has, he's going to have these outstanding lawyers who are going to fight the cases and ultimately settle the ones that need to be settled.
Mm-hmm. All right, Candace, question from Diddy. Why Diddy isn't ratting out people to get a deal?
So I tell you what, there's still time for a plea deal. I mean, it's very unlikely that will happen.
Is there really? Is there really? You think that would happen? What would that look like at the end of this trial? Everybody testified already.
Like I said, it's very unlikely that would happen. We're saying that the door is open, technically speaking, but we know that is, we have passed that. That ship has sailed. Now I'm trying to remember what your question was. Oh, will you rat people out? I think that one of the strategies that we don't know about is what's going on behind the scenes with Sean Combs. We don't know what that plea deal looked like. We don't know whether or not he gave up people, and if it was enough to get a plea deal that he liked. Obviously, it wasn't, because he didn't take it. So I think that there's too much information that we don't know about in terms of ratting other people out. And I wouldn't call it ratting. I would call, listen, you have to act and comply with what your defense team is asking you to do. There's information that I'm sure he has, and there's information that I'm sure his defense team has that is very, very important, and that perhaps can get him off in maybe some of these civil cases. That is yet to be seen, but those civil cases are going to be what is next. And we might hear a little bit more about who's involved in those particular cases.
I never believed that he was going to be ratting out people, because if you take the prosecution's narrative, he's the head. He's the top fish. He's the head of this criminal organization. Now, you could say politicians, you could say other KK. I mean, it's really him. It's you could look at other celebrities and politicians, but a lot of it was innuendo. A lot of it, I think a lot of people went into this case thinking that, oh my gosh, every single white party is going to be exposed. Every single celebrity is going to be exposed. It's going to be like Jeffrey Epstein. That really wasn't what it was. It was a very specific prosecution with specific victims, specific charges. And I don't think he was ever going to take anything where he would have any prison time. Because one of the reasons we have rushed to trial, Leah, right, is because he didn't want to spend any more time in jail. I still think that he thought the reason he surrendered his passport, the reason he came to New York, he thought he was going to make bail. And if that was the case, we wouldn't have a trial right now. He's going to push it down the road.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think people, the viewers, and I was born in the 90s, so I recognize that people might not be aware of this. This is not the first time that Sean Combs has been charged with a crime, right? This is not the first time at all, right? We have the issue with the gun with J-Lo back in 2003. If I'm not mistaken, he was charged with murder, or there was a conversation about him being charged with murder. So he's used to okay, I'm Sean Combs. I show up, I do what they tell me to do, I pay whatever I need to pay, and then I go on with my life, continuing to do what I've been doing. And I truly believe that there is a part of him that still thinks, despite all of the evidence that has been proffered against him, that that's what's going to happen this time.
David, we got a question that came up from Kanisha James. Hi, awesome panel. Thank you. Question. Isn't Christina Coram, who we were just mentioning, Christina Coram, like Ghislaine isn't KK like Ghislaine for Epstein? She was never called as a witness. Why would KK be different?
It's very, very good analogy there. Now, she's referring to Ghislaine Maxwell from the Epstein case, who really brought these teenage girls to Epstein so that he could engage in illegal sex with them. And now she's serving 20 plus years in prison for that. I don't think we heard that KK participated in Sean Combs' instance that much as Ghislaine Maxwell did with Epstein, but she is the chief of staff. Her name has been bannered about this entire trial. She's never called to the stand by either side. She's definitely one of the co-conspirators that's going to be bannered about in closing argument as being in on a lot of these crimes. And she's a central figure. And if he gets convicted, there's a very good chance.
This lady right here is the one that they saying was his like assistant, saying she had to do with a lot of stuff, but they ain't never.
She's going to get charged next.
Let's talk, Candace. I think you want to say something about KK. I feel like you want to say something about KK.
Well, KK is one of those people. If you hear somebody dozens and dozens of times in a trial, this person has to be involved. Again, not to.
Why is she blinking like that?
KK.
Well, KK is one of those people. If you hear somebody dozens and dozens of times in a trial, this person has to be involved. Again, not to the extent of Maxwell, like was just mentioned. But we know that she knew everything that was happening along the way. We may not have heard from her, but we actually did. We heard from her through text. We heard from her through different conversations. We heard from her through the last two summary witnesses that had digital evidence, huge footprints of how she was involved. So we may not have heard from her physically, and we may not have heard from Sean physically out of their mouths, but we heard something that could not be disproved and that was entered into evidence. 36 pages of information that connected everybody together. I think that she's very, very important. And I think that had she come for either prosecution or the defense, I don't know, I think that would have opened the door for Sean Combs to actually testify and blame it on her. I know it's one of those things, well, yeah, when we look at the 1970 statute and the crime boss loophole, that's what it was created. As you said, they were going after Sean Combs. But with the same token, when it comes to his defense, his biggest defense, in my estimation, would be actually it was KK, or she's also partly to blame, because had she taken that stand, she would have known so much information, she would have sunk his ship so quick. He would have come up for air swimming and paddle boating right to that stand so that he could act in his own defense.
I mean, in a racketeering conspiracy case, he can't have agreed by himself. He needed somebody else. They say she's the main co-conspirator, and I wonder if the jury's going to be thinking about that. Quick question. A lot of talk about what happened yesterday. I mentioned it today with Sierra. Oh my gosh, prosecutors are abandoning arson and kidnapping. That was not the case, right? They abandoned a theory of it, but here we got a question. Sunset of the North, the attempted arson and kidnapping dropped. Is this still charges because it happened, not attempted? So I think that let's just clarify. We're right. They're still going forward with arson and kidnapping. You think it was a good idea that they dropped it, the attempt? Because I guess they're still moving forward with the idea, no, he committed arson, he committed kidnapping, or he committed conspiracy to commit kidnapping or arson, or he committed aiding and abetting kidnapping or arson. You think this is a good idea to streamline the case for the jury?
I do. I think this is from a merger standpoint. If we can argue that the actual crime was committed, we don't need the attempt because the crime itself was committed, right? We know that there was testimony from Kid Cudi regarding the arson. We know that there was testimony from Jane as well as Cassie regarding the kidnapping. So we no longer need an attempt at committing these crimes because the crimes, as far as the evidence has been proffered, if you believe the evidence, the crimes were committed, and there no longer needs to be a need for the attempt of the said crimes.
Mm-hmm. I want to play you something. So we knew this would come into evidence. We knew it was a big part of this case. As much as the 2016 tape of Sean Combs beating Cassie Ventura in the hotel hallway of the LA Intercontinental Hotel was going to be a big piece of evidence. In fact, that's how the prosecution started their case. We also knew his apology video was going to come in, 2 days after CNN had published it. I want to play it right now, talk about what impact this is going to have in the case.
It's so difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life, but sometimes you got to do that. I was up. I mean, I hit rock bottom, but I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now. I went and I sought out professional help. I had to go into therapy, and go into rehab. Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry. But I'm committed to be a better man each and every day. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry.
David, what impact do you think that video is going to have, aside from the fact that before trial, I think the prosecutors made a great argument. They said, you can't argue that the tape of the 2016 tape was altered or isn't real. He's basically admitting it's him. But besides that, what impact do you think that's going to have? Because I believe in jury instructions, there is this component of voluntary intoxication, that he didn't form the proper criminal intent that might be necessary for, let's say, sex trafficking. What do you think of that video? What value is that video going to have for the jury?
Here's what I'd say. If we were just talking about the Intercontinental Hotel incident, the beating of Cassie on that videotape, and then the video and the apology by Combs is played, okay, it kind of has an impact on the jury, and he says all the right things and seems contrite, and it's never going to happen again. I'm a changed man. Okay. But we've now heard so many bad acts about Sean Combs over a long period of time that it rings hollow. It no longer has an effect on me because I'm like, you apologize for that because you had to. It became public. What about the other 40 things that you did that are despicable? So I don't think it's going to carry a lot of weight in this trial.
By the way, a lot more conversation about KK. So I'll throw this to you, Candace. Never B asks, Jesse, if they prove RICO, right, racketeering conspiracy, doesn't Christina Coram go to jail since she's part of his enterprise?
Well, she doesn't go to jail right now. No. She's going to have to go through the process, right? Everybody's due their day in court. So it's nothing.
That's enough of the Diddy, though, man. We're going to see what happened to Diddy in a couple days, man. Real soon. Let's see what we're going to find. Hold on. Let's find something else to watch.